Good morning, everybody. My name is David Grosso, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Education. The time is now 10 o'clock in the morning on October 22nd, 2015, and we are in room 120 of the John A. Wilson Building, and I'm calling this roundtable on the modernization of District of Columbia public library facilities to order. The District of Columbia Public Library System is comprised of 25 branches and the Martin Luther King Jr. Central Library. The District of Columbia Public Library is a vibrant center of activity for residents and visitors in the District of Columbia. The library provides environments that invite reading, learning, and community discussion, equips people to learn all their lives, to embrace diversity, and to build a thriving city. Next year, 2016, marks the 10th anniversary of the recommendations of Mayor Williams' Blue Ribbon Commission on Public Libraries. In the interceding decade, DCPL has overseen the modernization and renovation of the vast majority of its library branches, including the expenditure of nearly $250 million in taxpayer funds. Renovated facilities to date are often completed on budget and more often than not on time. Very rarely, if at all, do DCPL projects go over budget, and DCPL goes above and beyond expectations to attempt to meet the needs of the entire community, and this deserves to be commended. Over $250 million is currently budgeted in the next 6 years in the capital improvement plan for library modernization projects to continue, a vast majority of which is allocated for the modernization of the Martin Luther King Jr. Central Library. The D.C. Public Library has exercised effective oversight of its capital projects and may provide some insight on best practices we can duplicate elsewhere in the city to better manage other public capital projects. The point of this hearing is to highlight some of those best practices, to learn how the library sets and manages expectations both with the community and with its contractors, to get an update on projects currently under construction or in the design phase, and to learn more about plans for the upcoming MLK Library modernization, one of the largest current public expenditures in the District of Columbia. We are also looking forward to hearing from all the public witnesses about the library's community engagement practices and how modernizations better meet the needs of the local neighborhood. So, with that, I would like to go ahead and call up our first panel of witnesses. We will proceed first with Neil Gregory, President, Friends of Southeast Library. Mr. Gregory. Martin Smith, Executive Director of Barracks Row Libraries, or Main Street, I'm sorry. And David Perry, Acting Chairman, Board of Barracks Row, Main Street. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you today? Who's going to go first?
Yes, I will.
All right. Whenever you're ready, sir.
I'm Neil Gregory, the President of the Friends of Southeast Library. For more than 30 years, we've been an advocate group for the city's libraries and for our Capitol Hill neighborhood, where we encourage reading and support literacy programs for young and old. During the past decade, FOSSEL, that's how we're known, F-O-S-E-L, has raised almost $200,000 to support programs to purchase equipment and supplies for the library. With a local Girl Scout troop and Ginkgo Gardens, we built a beautiful garden around our branch library with a patio and seating areas where patrons can read or use their laptops or tablets. We partner with teachers and parents of the children in our neighborhood schools, encouraging after-school programs and weekend activities that are links to their continuing education. FOSSEL applauds the efforts of DCPL to build new structures, expand its circulation, and modernize its facilities with the backing of the DC Council. We join you in imagining a new central library and envisioning advances in information technology that will reshape the way we currently use the library system. Historic Southeast Library, located on a little triangle-shaped site at 7th Street between D and South Carolina, is one of the smallest of the DC's 24 branches, yet is also one of the city's busiest in terms of patrons and circulation. Opened to great acclaim in 1922, the one-story building is an original Carnegie Library that has served the community well for almost a century. But no longer are people just checking out books. They come to the library for children's programs, for author talks, community meetings. There is a single meeting room in the basement. The place is packed with children during story hour, with 3 sessions offered each morning, 5 days a week. Strollers line the sidewalks. And these events are so crowded that advance tickets are required. If you could imagine a bouncer for these children's programs. Library patrons also have to place their names in a queue to secure time on a computer. There's a shortage of shelf space for books, audio recordings, and DVDs. 10 years ago, the American Library Association had its convention here in D.C. and selected us for a This Old House makeover. The vendors of the Library Journal paid for new carpeting, lighting, other amenities, furniture to show the convention attendees what they called a library of the future. The makeover uncovered beautiful wooden columns and a magnificent fireplace with the original ceramic tiles put there in 1922 depicting scenes of the Canterbury Tales were hidden behind the bookshelves and the fiberboards. Because of the historic nature of the structure, however, there's no way to add floors or increase the size in any significant way. In fact, when they added handicapped-equipped restrooms, they took away space. Structural problems still remain, particularly with heating and cooling. The building is just too small. In the 2019 capital budget, there is funding for improving Southeast Library. There are no details in the budget, but there's a plan on the table to expand the library as part of the redevelopment of the Eastern Market Metro Plaza, an exciting proposal to create a new town center for Capitol Hill, a park-like setting with trees and fountains and playgrounds from 7th Street to 9th Street on both sides of the avenue. In this proposed plan, the exterior of the library, with its classic front, would serve as a backdrop for the western side of the development. Trees that block the facade would be relocated, showing off the building's monumental neoclassical style, adorned by a massive pedimented entrance portico supported by paired Corinthian columns. They would leave the double-leaf entry doors and large-scale semicircular arch window openings that flank the current entrance. But the library would have a new entry point across 7th Street. Paralleling the entrance to the Metro would be a new glass-enclosed library entrance on the plaza. Library visitors would take stairs or an elevator down to the underground spaces, which would feature natural lighting from skylights on the plaza. These could be pyramid-shaped glass towers similar to the Louvre in Paris, or the skylights that you see over the cafeteria and the tunnel that links the National Gallery of Art with its east building. So we're thinking about a Louvre on the hill. The new area under the plaza could be used for reading rooms, computer labs, space for teens or young adults, or new gathering places for seniors or other Capitol Hill community groups. A passageway lined with display cases or artworks would go under 7th Street, linking the new space with the existing building, which would also serve a new configured interior design. During the past 2 years, there have been numerous community meetings, and the other panelists will describe the plans for this massive work on the plaza. Friends of Southeast Library thanks the committee and this council for recognizing the importance that libraries bring to our city and our disparate neighborhoods. DCPL is the key to bridging the digital divide as we move into workplaces for the future. We urge your continued support for this vital mission.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith, are you going next? Oh, you're going. Mr. Perry's going to go next. Great.
Chairman Grosso, Councilman Allen, members of the committee, my name is David Perry, and I'm appearing before you today in my capacity as the chairman of the board of Barracks Row Main Street. As I think most of you are aware, Barracks Row was a nonprofit organization that was established about 15 years ago to spearhead the revitalization of the district's oldest commercial corridor, 8th Street Southeast. With strong support from all elements of the Capitol Hill community and a great deal of assistance from you and your colleagues on the council and from many district agencies and departments, Barracks Row has become a safer and more attractive street and one of the city's premier dining and retail destinations. You've already heard from Neil Gregory, the president of the Friends of the Southeast Library, of the pressing need for the rehabilitation and expansion of the Southeast Library. Simply put, in its current cramped facility, the Southeast Library cannot begin to meet the needs of the large and growing number of individuals and families who wish to avail themselves of its services. What I'd like to do this morning is to set the library expansion proposal in a slightly larger context. The Southeast Library sits adjacent to an historic public square on Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast that was envisioned by Pierre L'Enfant. This site, all the publicly owned land along Pennsylvania Avenue between 7th and 9th Street Southeast, has never been developed as an attractive, inviting, and well-designed public square like the other major L'Enfant squares in the District of Columbia. Several years ago, Barracks Row Main Street and the community undertook a year-long planning process that resulted in a bold framework for transforming this site's neglected, decayed 1970s landscape into a vibrant, engaging, and functionally improved public space in the heart of Capitol Hill. The plan, known as the Eastern Market Metro Park Master Plan, enjoys broad support from both individuals and organizations on Capitol Hill. Attached to my remarks in the back is a rendering of the overall site plan and several renderings that show in detail one of the plan's most important features, how the historic Southeast Library can be expanded in order to meet today's DCPL standards. Our idea, which was developed after consulting with DCPL staff, is to expand the library below grade, underneath 7th Street, and beneath the Metro Plaza, and to create a new library entrance pavilion on the plaza. As you can see in the renderings, 2 large skylights, one directly behind the new entrance and the other slightly to the north, will bring abundant natural light into that new below-grade space. Mr. Chairman, this master plan represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to achieve a number of important civic objectives, including the creation of a beautiful and welcoming public space, a way of rationalizing the various transportation activities, Metro, the Circulator, Metro Bus, Capitol bike shares, that occur in and around the plaza, and most importantly, the much needed expansion of the Southeast Library. We appreciate the opportunity to share our views with the Education Committee this morning, and we urge the DC Council to continue to support this most worthy project. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Smith now, right? Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Grosso, members of the committee. My name is Martin Smith. I serve as the Executive Director of Barracks Row Main Street, the oldest Main Street program in Washington, D.C. As my Chairman, David Perry, had mentioned, there we go. As my Chairman, David Perry, mentioned, we serve the Capitol Hill community along 8th Street Southeast, just south of the Eastern Market Metro Plaza and the Southeast Library. As you've just heard from Neil Gregory and of the Friends of the Southeast Library and from David Perry, there is a significant need for the exciting plan to redevelop and expand this historic library as part of a much larger redevelopment of the Eastern Market Metro Plaza. This plan is part of a multi-year community-driven process that concluded with a clear community consensus that this significant neighborhood asset was ripe for redevelopment. This caused community members to join together and, with our professional team, develop a creative plan to utilize the space underneath 7th Street Southeast and the plaza itself to provide the needed real estate to make this expansion possible. My testimony today, however, is about the larger impact that this project can have on the greater Capitol Hill community. As a professional urban planner, I have seen the impact that quality community facilities can have on larger neighborhood dynamics and economic development. Barracks Row Main Street has advocated for years for the redevelopment of this L'Enfant Reservation and the adjacent historic Carnegie Library precisely because we are aware of the impact this project can have on the surrounding commercial and residential properties. The development of a premier civic space anchored by a world-class library is the next logical step in the renaissance of Barracks Row that began 15 years ago. The library component of the design creates thousands of new square feet of indoor use for an expanded collection community meeting space and new opportunities for learning, and also flows seamlessly into the new outdoor space that almost functions as a grand reading room for the library patrons in a planned bosque of trees with movable tables and chairs. Members of the committee, I urge you to prioritize this project as you consider the next phase of library projects citywide. This proposal resulted from an extensive public engagement process, enjoys widespread community support, and has the potential to bring significant economic development to the adjacent neighborhood. The Southeast Library expansion deserves your support as well. This concludes my testimony, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate all three of you being here. I'll just make a note for the record that I'm having a hearing at the Southeast Library on November 7th where we're inviting teachers from all over the city to come, and we had to actually do a online ticket thing so that we could make sure we didn't have too many come, because it only holds enough, so many people. But we wanted to get into the library, we wanted to support it, and it's such an ideal location with the Metro right there across the street, and it's just in the hub of Capitol Hill. So I'm very supportive of this. We'll keep working towards the conclusion that we can get this done. I think the idea of putting those pyramid windows in is great, because it'll get that light down in there, which is what we're trying to do. And then I think the winning part of this for me is that it gets it outside too, in that plaza, and actually activates that Metro Plaza there and the whole square with tables and chairs, and like you said, a grand outside reading room. Well, that's what we're trying to do. That's what the point of the whole library system is to get more people engaged and involved in our city, and I think that would do that well there. Maybe a little cafe, maybe never mind. I know but listen, I'm going to turn to my colleague. We've been joined by Councilmember Charles Allen, who knows way more about this than I do, from the Great Ward 6. So, Councilmember Allen, if you'd like to do any opening statement, and of course ask questions of your direct constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I like your cafe idea. Maybe as long as they have Peregrine coffee, so we keep it local, I think that's a good idea. Thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you're holding this hearing. One of the things that I have been really pleased with, and I've known because Councilmember Grosso and I have known each other for several years, the fact of having the libraries in the community education is important, because I think we've got a great friend and partner on library services and thinking about how our libraries work in the chairman of the committee, as well as finding those connections between education in our schools and our libraries. So I'm very pleased that this has been held together within this context from a committee structure here at the council. To me, DC Public Libraries have a incredible track record that frankly should be the envy of a lot of government. They have renovated and rebuilt a lot of our community and neighborhood libraries incredibly well. Beautiful design and beautiful architecture and beautiful placemaking in space, but also just as important, they deliver these things on time and on budget, and just do an outstanding job. And so I have a lot of confidence in the DC Public Libraries because of that. I think they have really strong leadership. They have excellent leadership within the board, and I think they have excellent leadership that comes from our friends organizations, who are phenomenal voices and advocates for our neighborhood libraries. So that's part of what gives me a lot of confidence. Now, when we talk about this project, this is a big idea. Thinking through how we use a Carnegie building, which, because of its historic nature, we can't go up, we can't go out. We're fairly constrained there. And the Southeast Branch Library, as amazing as it is, it's not like there's an actual children's section. There's kind of a children's corner. There's a couple of computers. It's the meeting room. You got to have the tickets to make sure that you don't overwhelm the capacity. It's an amazing asset for our community, but we're stretching it pretty thin. And I think, and we'll ask our library leadership in a little bit, I'm fairly certain we actually have more visitors at the Southeast Branch Library than we do at the Northeast Branch Library, which is about 3 to 4 times as big, I think, than the Southeast Branch. So the use is clearly there. The metro accessibility makes it a huge potential. One of the things I wanted to ask a little bit about, because any project, of course, especially on Capitol Hill, I feel like it's a novel thing when we get everybody agreeing on an idea. And so to Mr. Perry, Mr. Gregory, Mr. Smith, any of you want to touch on that a little bit more, because we've gone through several high-profile projects that have divided the community somewhat, where people don't have the same vision. And my experience has been, whether talking with the ANC, talking with residents, with our community organizations, I'm sure we're going to disagree on a color of a brick or something, but is more or less, I've heard nothing but support and strong support from across the community, and just want to give you a chance to either confirm that, or if you had any other experience.
Your assumption is correct. This project enjoys broad support from a whole host of people and organizations and individuals, and I think that's in part because your predecessor actually kicked off a planning process at the Hill Center. We had several large public meetings that were well publicized, so the community was involved in this planning process right from the beginning, and we had multiple community meetings. We had a stakeholders group of 18 individuals who represented all of the organizations on Capitol Hill. So throughout the process, working with Omi von Sweden, the landscape architecture firm that has designed the public improvements on the plaza, and Amy Weinstein, the planner who oversaw the entire project, we've had community involvement right from day one, and I think that's one of the reasons why the project has enjoyed such tremendous support.
Yeah. Well, I think also credit goes to you and your team too, because you've also led a process that has been very inclusive, that has brought in a lot of different perspectives to help drive towards this. I wanted to spend a quick second, if we can talk actually about the light, the natural light, because I think this is an important feature. Expanding in this way is very different. We're going to have a lot of people look at us a little funny, trying to think through what is this, how does this work? But I think it's a very creative approach. And again, I think that public libraries they're the type of creative thinkers that can make something like this work. But of course, anybody who's going to look at an expansion of a library that goes below ground is going to be concerned about, are we just building out a giant dark basement? Can you talk a little bit about the features of how we make sure that we have that type of natural light that really makes us feel like this is an exciting, inviting place?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and promise a specific design now, but both Chairman Grosso and Mr. Gregory referred to the fact that there will be skylights in some form or fashion that will bring natural light down into that below-grade space, so that we're not going to be creating a dark, cavernous space that you access through a narrow tunnel underneath 7th Street. The idea is to flood that space with natural light so it's a welcome and inviting space. Frankly, it will be up to the DCPL staff and the staff of the Southeast Library to get into the specifics of how that space will be utilized, what particular programs will occur within that space. But since the principal entrance to the building itself will be on the plaza, there'll be a lot of traffic passing through the space, as well as the space itself will be utilized, I suspect, either as a reading facility or computer station. We aren't at the point now, certainly from our perspective as a community group, we're not in a position to be dictating to anybody how the space will get used. But the DCPL staff was involved in the consultations that occurred during the planning for this project, and I'm sure they have some ideas about how the space may be used. But I would just reassure everyone that it will be a well-lit, pleasant, inviting space, notwithstanding the fact that it's 25 feet below grade.
Exactly. Well, and I think we'll have to have, obviously, DCPL will think through the ways in which we make it work best. My time is up, so I'll just ask a real brief question, because this is going to come up no matter how far we're able to take this project. And that is, it's within the historic district. You've got a historic building. Can you just very briefly talk about your engagement with the Historic Preservation Office and the ideas that you have around the plaza as well as the library, to just talk a little about how you've engaged them in a way that has their support for a project like this?
Our consulting team met with the staff of the DC Historic Preservation Office right from the beginning, because the one issue that we knew could conceivably be controversial was the creation of this entrance pavilion for the library on the plaza. It was actually staff members collectively of the Historic Preservation Office who suggested that the entrance pavilion be located directly on access on South Carolina Avenue to give a kind of a framing for that historic avenue that was created in the original Lawfond plan. There will obviously need to be some kind of an environmental assessment or reconnaissance going forward, which I hope will be headed up by the Department of General Services. Frankly, I think that for the most part of the six pieces of publicly owned land between 7th and 9th, I think the only one that's going to require detailed analysis will be the Metro Plaza itself, because in part because of the construction of the entrance pavilion. The others were simply changing how the surface treatment of the land itself.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I just want to make sure we hit that, because there's it's a complex and exciting idea. There's any number of barriers that could come up. I think you've identified as many of them as you can so that we can work through each one, including the environmental assessment, which we have been working with the Department of General Services to finally get that ball rolling, which has been pretty frustrating, I know, for you guys as well as myself. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate your testimony about this and laying this out. I think it's a phenomenal project, and I'm excited to see it be able to take the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Hope you have a nice day. Okay, we'll move to the next panel. I don't see Joanne Newhouse here yet, so unless she's hiding somewhere. Is Robert Oliver here, public witness? Come on up, sir. Andy Litsky, please join us. Andy's Vice Chairman of the Advisory Neighborhood Commission 6D. And Susan Haight, President of the Federation of Friends of the District of Columbia Public Library. Mr. Oliver, do you want to start us off?
Well, yes.
All right, well, make sure the mic's on there. It's just push that button. There you go. Thank
All
you
right,
very much, and thanks
fantastic.
for being here. Appreciate you.
All right, first I'd like to say good morning to everybody, and I want to thank this body for giving this issue the seriousness and attention that it deserves. The D.C. Public Libraries are a very important and integral part of the D.C. community. Okay, let me start by saying that I'm testifying in support of the District of Columbia Library's Capital Improvement Program. I will start by listing some of the services provided by the library and conclude with the positive effect of the Capital Improvement Program. First, the District of Columbia Public Library has performed many roles within the communities in which branches are located. DCPL has served as a community hub through its children's and teens programming, book clubs and author talks, and adult literacy and job training. Furthermore, DCPL resources are used to help the least in our community by providing computers for GED training and testing, job search and resume submission, and homework support for children and teens without access to technology. DCPL has also taken on social roles such as being a cooling and/or hypothermia center, a destination for the homeless, and its increasing partnership with the school system. Lastly, there are the new and exciting technologies such as 3D printing, maker spaces, etc. None of this can be sustained without the capital investment needed to prepare DCPL for the future. Second, the Capital Improvement Program is moving our aging library system into the 21st century. Currently, DCPL has renovated 14 branch libraries with 2 under construction, and the main library, Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library, is in the early design phase. While DCPL has attracted world-class architects and construction firms, the library will realize other benefits. Each renovated branch includes the latest in green, energy saving, and other technologies designed to reduce operating costs and environmental degradation, such as LED lighting, fiber optics, improved heating and ventilation, and air conditioning, are examples of the new efficient technologies. And this is very important because one of the things that costs the cities and costs the libraries are the ongoing maintenance, are the ongoing utilities. So anything you can do to cut that down to preserve and protect your computer equipment, which needs a certain amount of cooling, that's great. So when you build an environment for your equipment, it works much better than putting something in an environment which there is is not suited for. Returning to my text, DCPL has been an excellent steward of the Capital Improvement Program and budget. Library management has engaged the community residents, library staff, and library users in the design process. The result is near unanimous acceptance of the completed facilities, which is evidenced by increased client usage resulting from building modernization and program expansion. Furthermore, DCPL has competently managed each project from initial community presentation, construction, and delivery. In nearly all instances, capital projects are delivered on time and on budget. Lastly, I support the DCPL Capital Improvement Program to ensure the continuity of the completion of the scheduled projects. Funding is difficult to procure, but easy to lose. I cite the history of the Lamont Riggs Library as an example. This 32-year-old facility opened its doors in 1983. Although the local Citizens Association requested a library branch as early as 1957, it took the library system until 1966 to include this project in the library's capital budget. Thereafter, the project was met with inaction until 1979, when Congress finally approved funding. And 4 years later, the Lamont Riggs branch finally opened. But it took 13 years to find funding at this project's inclusion into the 1966 capital budget. And now, as then, Congress is in no mood to spend. So let us keep our commitments by preserving the DCPL Capital Improvement Program and not allow future construction deadlines to slip. Respectfully, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Litsky? Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman and Councilmember Allen. My name is Andy Litsky. I serve as Vice Chair of ANC 6D, representing the 15,000 residents of Southwest, Navy Yard, and Buzzard Point. Today, I testify at the behest of my commission. I appreciate having the opportunity to deliver some very short remarks. And while I expect that the preponderance of the discussion today will be focused on the extraordinary renovation plans for our library downtown, MLK headquarters, I want to remind you that there are also a number of branch libraries that have been budgeted this year for planning of new construction, among them my own home branch in Southwest. I've been a patron of the Southwest branch pretty much on a weekly basis for the past 36 years. It's a well-loved facility at best, which, although it's been upgraded, and it was upgraded several years ago, it doesn't have the space, facilities, or staffing to accommodate the needs of what may be the fastest growing community in the city. We're really growing a new city south of the Expressway on both sides of South Capitol Street, all of that contained in ANC 6D. So I come here today to urge you not only to move forward this year, I believe it's budgeted in 2017 actually for the planning of this facility, but on behalf of our community leadership at the ANC and the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly, our Civic Association, and the Friends of the Southwest Library, as well as our new Southwest bid, to include Southwest residents at the very beginning of this process when you begin to plan the Southwest Library. Indeed, Southwesters right now are perhaps the most uniquely group of folks in town to participate in a planning process. Even as community transforms before our eyes. Over the past 2 years, hundreds of our residents have participated in putting together a Southwest Small Area Plan, recently adopted by the Council, that clearly articulated our thoughts and concerns about what we want to see in a new library. Among those concerns was to create an inspiring structure at its current location that would take full advantage of the adjacent Library Park playground and serve as a community anchor for important gathering places for meetings and civic conversation. Some of the ideas that I heard in those breakout sessions included programmable space, music rooms for instrument practice, a center for new media, graduate programs for seniors, short-term incubator space for startups, maybe a coffee shop inside or on an adjacent patio. Indeed, when that was brought up several years ago, when the library was being renovated, we brought that up because the Waterside Mall was being demolished, and we recognized that we were going to lose community space, so we encouraged the library at that point to have that kind of facility on site. It didn't fly. Now we're going to have a new library. Perhaps it will. We also especially want to make sure that this is a safe place where kids can be surrounded by books and where learning is cool and curiosity is encouraged. While I won't attempt to inject any of my own thoughts and ideas today, the main point that I want to leave you with is that planning in Southwest should not simply be about the headquarters staff or the architect or the interior designer. It's about us. It's about the community. It's about the patrons. So as much as we want this new library built, Southwest wants it built the same way, and we want to be engaged. So even before you begin to think about an RFP, please do the hard work to ensure that any architect or designer worth working with will be more than receptive to participating in community needs analysis, focus groups, and interviews, much as had been accomplished in the Southeast branch. And I hope, Councilmember Allen, perhaps you will wind up forming an advisory committee for the Southwest redevelopment branch of the library so that we can have a similar process undergone in Southwest as happened over on Capitol Hill. Don't let anyone try to tell you what he or she thinks our community needs. Include us in the process so we can tell you directly. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Haight, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Susan Haight. I'm resident of Ward 2 and president of the West End Library Friends and also president of the Federation of Friends of the D.C. Public Library. The Federation is composed of 22 neighborhood friends of the library in all wards. I'm testifying on behalf of the Federation this morning. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify and thank you for your continued support of the library. This will be my 21st public testimony over 16 years. I believe the library is the de facto source of education for all residents of the district. I also believe that that DCPL has been a good steward of the funds used to modernize, rebuild, and renovate our neighborhood libraries. They have engaged the community in the design process, and I am positive that the patrons of the 14 renovated facilities see the results of their input We need to finish the job, however. The numbers speak for themselves. As my associate here said, all capital projects have been on time, on budget, and are operationally efficient. All new and renovated libraries have experienced an increase in use. These renovations have enabled the staff to provide more innovative and expanded programming, and they have contributed to a sense of community pride, which is important in all wards. The juxtaposition between renovated branches and the antiquated MLK library hurts the overall brand and efficiency of the library system. The Central Library should be an example of how the district moves forward and supports its residents. We need to give DCPL the funding needed to make the Central Library the state-of-the-art resource that the residents of the district deserve. A well-thought-out and appointed Central Library will help close our educational and economic gap and add value to lives of all residents. I urge you to use your influence to keep the renovation of MLK on track. The timely opening of a new Central Library is essential and reinforces the mission of the library, which is to be the leader of resources for job training, adult literacy, childhood literacy, local culture activities, and the Center for District Initiatives. It is also the location for aspirational programming, innovation, and a catalyst for economic development. I thank you for allowing me to testify this morning.
Thank you very much. I think I've been here for quite a few of those hearings, and it's always good to see you. I think you represent the Federation very well, and certainly also your own neighborhood as well. I want to thank you all for your testimony. You guys know the budgets as well as I do of what we're doing here. I think Southwest as well as Lamont Rings are at least on the horizon. Southwest a little sooner. I think we have $18 million over 3 years put aside, planning 17, 18, and 19. So that's something we got to stick with, and hopefully if we need to increase it, I think a public process like you mentioned that maybe Councilmember Allen could take the lead on is really important, I think, to have that conversation in partnership with the library. So Mr. Linsky, thank you very much for doing that. Linsky. And then I just want to say, Mr. Oliver, thank you for being here. I was out at Lamont Riggs. I've been there quite a few times, and I agree. It's something that we have to keep working towards. But the library system, like you said, has done a good job. Now we just have to stick with it and keep going forward. So I appreciate that. And thank you for your comments. Ms. Haight, thank you as well. Councilmember Allen, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for your testimony. I really appreciate hearing more about Lamont Riggs and the things that are needed there. Ms. Haight, for your leadership with the Federation, really appreciate that. It's been long and consistent. Really appreciate that. It's benefited the system. Commissioner Linsky, appreciate it. You have been a great advocate for the Southwest Library Branch for years, and so I appreciate that as we've gone through together the battle around changing it from essentially building a new library, if we'll sell off the old one, to now actually having the capital dollars in the budget so that we can see what we want. That was something that I think I heard certainly from the Southwest community was how important it was for this site and for this location. And that we didn't want to sell off the property and squeeze in a library somewhere else, but instead this was an ideal location in particular because of, in my mind, two key reasons. One, as you rightly noted, the expansion of the growth of the Southwest community is adding so many residents. This is a great central location. But then also the accessibility between all of our residents, but in particular, I mean, I go to the Southwest Branch Library all the time with my daughter, and I know it's heavily utilized also by a lot of our young boys and girls that are in Greenleaf, that are in James Creek. It's a great resource as well, especially after school hours. And so keeping it there rather than squeezing it off somewhere else, I think will also help in that respect, so it's important. In terms of the planning process, I would say, just to make sure it's clear, I appreciate Mr. Perry talking about the process around the Southeast Branch Library. That wasn't something, Councilmember Wells did not design this plaza. He certainly helped pull a meeting together, but what we were able to do is find private partners that were able to help have folks like Amy Weinstein and others who were able to think and do a lot of the design work to that. I have great staff. I don't know if I have architects on staff. So being able to think that through, I'd be happy to work with you and many others across Southwest, of course. I think, though, now that we have the funding in the budget and it's on the closer horizon, I think that's the process actually where, rather than have you or I start drawing it out, we need to have the library be a part of that. And I think that's something that we can work on together to make sure that happens. One question I've got for you, because I think this is something that we've wrestled with a little bit, and there's multiple conversations taking place, of course, in the Southwest community, but one of those right now has to do with how we in accordance with the small area plan and with others, think about the build first model of replacing greenleaf housing. And one of the conversations I've heard is there a way in which the library plays a part in that? Is there a way in which the library, while we rebuild a library to create a beautiful, fantastic neighborhood library with all the things that we want, as you outlined, that we talked about in the small area planning process, do you have any thoughts on whether or not that site, of course, preserving the things that are so important to us, the green space, the open space as well, has any co-location opportunities that would help serve other needs within the community?
Actually, I hadn't considered that as part of any potential planning for the site, since we were most focused on ensuring that it was not going to be located on 4th Street, so we could preserve as much retail space as we possibly could in that central corridor. I think that were that to be brought up as a topic of discussion, ideally it would be this Saturday when we have a large meeting in Southwest on the 24th at Westminster Church, I think from 1 to 3, that will be specifically, is it? I think it's 1 to 3. Oh, if it's 2 to 4, we need to get it down.
We'll make sure we get that correct.
Yeah, indeed. That'll be discussing the renovation of all of the Greenleaf properties. And I think once we get the entire, community there, public housing residents there, hopefully people from the library there as well, we'll be able to, raise that possibility. But I hadn't actually thought about that before. But indeed, it is district property. The library is going to be redone. And as we have been looking at other areas for build-first sites for public housing in the Southwest, such as potentially a DMV headquarters and where the fire truck repair shop is, that this presents opportunity as well.
Well, I appreciate that, and I apologize. You were correct. It's 1 to 3, not 2 to 4 on Saturday. But that's the type of conversation. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's something to think about because I know that we value very strongly across the board a build-first model of how we tackle the reinvestment in our Greenleaf public housing and the replacement of those units. I think it's just food for thought. We'll certainly chew on it on Saturday afternoon, and probably much beyond that too. But just wanted to raise that as something that we need to keep on the table, or at least think about it and decide. I don't have the answer either, but it's something to think about. All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Okay, we're going to now call Miss Wallace, Georgine Wallace, President of Friends of Southwest Library, Dana Wyckoff, President of Friends of Rosedale Library, and Sharon Turner, President of Friends of Woodridge Library. Ms. Turner, good morning. Ms. Wallace, maybe we'll start with you since we're on the subject. Yep. Oh, it's not on. There you go.
Microphone's always my enemy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Grosso and committee members. On behalf of the members of the Friends of the Southwest Library, I want to thank you for your assistance in providing for the modernization of not only our central library, but also several neighborhood libraries, including Southwest. And at the risk of embarrassing him, I want to extend a special thank you, and he's not here to be embarrassed, to my Ward 6 Councilman, Charles Allen, for his efforts to obtain funding for the modernization of the Southwest Neighborhood Library. He timed that well. He knows I always thank him. Today's budget environment necessitates that the city make wise investments in its capital projects. The financial independence granted to DCPL enhances its ability to serve the city and at the same time deliver budgets with a precision worthy of envy by other agencies. And in general, we've always heard this, capital budgets are delivered on time and on budget. Why is modernizing a library important? Well, for Martin Luther King Memorial Library, it's keeping a sacred trust. The day we named our central library, not just a branch library, after such an iconic figure, it became our duty to maintain a structure befitting his legacy. Consequently, the library took steps to retain world-class architects to design a model building respectful of historical integrity. Modernizing MLK is a vital step in moving the entire system into the 21st century. Now, for the Southwest Neighborhood Library, a new building is needed to better serve the demands of a changing population, as reflected by Mr. Litsky. Many patrons bring a laptop or other device with them to the library to use. but eventually they need to recharge it. Now, this simple task is not always as easy as you might think because we don't have that many outlets on the first floor. And electrical professionals have informed us that the 1960s wiring architecture will not support additional outlets, and we can't also add more computers to the first floor, which is something we need very much. Other building components also pose challenges. The electrical doors to the building don't always open evenly, and it's difficult to get through if someone using a cane or is using a cane or a wheelchair. Our popular children's library is on the second floor, and parents with strollers use the elevator to gain access. Unfortunately, the elevator is, at best, temperamental and has trapped several patrons. Not for very long. We get them out, but don't worry, they're not still there. We pull them out fast enough. Now, the heating and air conditioning is also an issue, and if you recall, Mr. Chairman, we had the honor of hosting you as in your education forum in June, and the staff wanted to really welcome you to the library and be a credit to our councilman. But the air conditioning refused to turn on until several painful minutes into your presentation, which I think really endeared us to the entire population of your group. Ward 6 probably is cringing at that memory. I noted a few structural reasons why a new building is important, but there are relevant neighborhood factors as well. The Southwest demographics are changing. The neighborhood I moved into in September 2001 did not have very many children. Today we have several young families living in Southwest needing services. As articulated by Mr. Litsky, thousands of new residents will be moving into the neighborhood by 2020 due to development along the Wharf, 4th Street, and M Street, just to name a few projects. The new residents will expect certain things out of their library that we cannot currently provide. A few issues are apparent now. Quickly, we need additional meeting rooms of a modest size. Our teen section on the first floor has a nice selection of books, but a small dedicated area for programs would be incentive for more interest and participation and get them into the library and off the street. A place for tweens in the children's area where they can do homework, select books, and use computers as needed would be nice. A new library will also be more secure, as a modern structure will contain digital cameras useful to law enforcement and versus the grainy pictures our current cameras provide. At present, Southwest is scheduled to go into the design phase in fiscal year 2017. We've not yet had a meeting to discuss the design of a public finance building. However, in the upcoming months, we'll be coming together as a community to discuss features we'd like to see in a new library. Ultimately, we would like to meet with DCPL next year with data on community needs and ideas to design and help pose real solutions, and we will be ready this time. To steal a line from our esteemed executive director, a library is no longer just a place that holds books. It's a gathering place for members of a community, an escape from outside pressures, and even a shelter from the violence outside its doors. A library is a trusted local institution that serves as a neutral meeting place and a confidential provider of vital services, such as job search skills and adult literacy. Investing in the modernization of these structures enhances the look of a neighborhood and increases community uses. Please continue to support DCPL in its efforts to bring our system into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wyckoff, good morning.
Good morning.
Turn on your mic there.
Yep, that would be a good idea.
Sure.
Okay, hello. Good morning, Chairman Grosso and members of the committee. I'm Dana Wyckoff, Chair of the Friends of the Rosedale Library and a member of the Executive Committee of the Federation of Friends of DCPL. I'm here in a slightly broader capacity. I don't have a specific, my building has already been built, thank you. But the discussion today is about the costs and benefits and building and renovating several branch buildings around the city and the Central Library Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. There are costs to building a world-class library system that befits the capital, especially after decades of little growth or investment by the city in the collection, staff, or buildings, so that just getting to a standard level of service and structures requires reliable and continued funding. But the investments do pay off. As an example, this past Sunday was the 3rd anniversary of the Rosedale branch, and the benefits are very obvious to the neighbors that it serves in Wards 6, 5, and 7. A library provides not just access to books and computers, it serves as a cultural and community center and as an amenity for residents and businesses in changing neighborhoods. Excuse me. DCPL works with library groups and local community members to determine the needs and uses of the building that they want and incorporate that discussion into the design and planning. It also has an excellent track record of working with the fluctuating and sometimes woefully meager budgets it has been given over the years. Their ability to manage construction projects, often with the unofficial aid of library friends groups, is excellent, and I am confident that it will continue with both local branches and the MLK Library project. I do urge continued and increased funding for and DCPL focus on maintaining the new and renovated buildings. The shakeout period of any new construction is long, as Rosedale learned, when we didn't have heat in winter or air conditioning in summer at times. And maintenance of the new facilities, as well as the older ones, already built ones, is of the often award-winning facilities is key. For example, and this is a personal note, Rosedale currently does not have outdoor signage, although we're now 3 years old, as do all other branches, even the so-called co-located ones. Window repairs, no bulletin boards, a broken front door, and other there are among other issues of concern, as is the poorly designed and inadequate staff facilities, both desk and storage. But and quite honestly, a quick trip to IKEA would solve most of that problem. But I'm certain those issues will be addressed soon. Overall, though, we commend DCPL's stewardship of capital funds and projects and recommend continued and even increased funding in future. Thank you personally to the committee, especially Chairman Grosso and Councilmember Allen, for your support of the DCPL budget over these last years, and we look forward to more conversations with you.
Thank you very much. And now from my neighborhood library, Ms. Turner.
Yes, sir.
Don't forget to turn your mic on. Oh, it's on. You got it. It's on.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to be heard by the community. I'm Sharon Turner, President of the Friends of the Woodridge Library, a member of the Federation of Friends, a native Washingtonian, and Ward 5 resident. In previous testimonies, I, representing the Woodridge Friends, have pleaded for funding to extend operational hours of all our branches, advocated to have the collections budget restored, and expressed our concerns about having adequate resources for staff development. Today, however, I come to praise Caesar. The DCPL system serves the whole population of the city. There are no boundaries, age limits, or lotteries to get in and use the libraries. Libraries provide job search support. They are community centers. In truth, they are daycare and senior centers. Libraries are intergenerational learning centers. They offer GED, ESL support, tutoring, early literacy programs, chess instruction, and even cooking demonstrations. For many services, you do not even have to have a library card, even though it's highly recommended. Executive Director Richard Reyes Gavlin noted on the Kojo Nambi show just yesterday that attendance at school is mandatory, whereas to use a library is strictly voluntary. The DCPL Capital Improvement Program has done much to make those places which are voluntarily visited inviting and comfortable. I remember the days when there was virtually no funding for DCPL for capital programs or much else. Elevators were completely out of service for years at a time. You went to the restroom with a buddy because there were no locks on doors. There was no tissue. There was no soap. Branches were often closed for lack of heating or air conditioning. Branches had poor lighting and very little signage. They were often dark and depressing. I know this firsthand because all this happened at Woodridge. Today, less than 10 years later, things have improved mightily. Not perfect, but a vast improvement. DCPL has rebuilt, renovated 14 libraries, neighborhood libraries, and 2 more are under construction, Woodridge being one of those under construction. Throughout this rebuilding renovation process, the community, staff, and library users have been engaged, requesting input, serving on selection panels for architects, making recommendations. This, too, I know firsthand because I have been engaged in those capacities regarding the Woodridge build. Just last month, our executive director and his staff attended a Woodridge meeting with the community, providing an update on the progress of our new building. Bing Tom, the architect of the Woodridge Library, is the same architect who designed the Meade Center at Arena Stage. Other renowned architects have been brought in at other branches. The construction staffs have also been first rate. At Woodridge, we have worked to not repeat some of the missteps which have occurred on other projects. We engaged to make sure our great expanse of windows overlooking Langdon Park were a standard size and commercially available to be easily replaced if necessary. We have been diligent in looking at the waterproofing. The building now rests on 50 caissons, 30 to 36 inches wide, at an amazing depth. The property closest to the build site even has a seismograph installed to ensure that the construction is not damaging their property. The capital dollars invested in the Woodridge project have been worthwhile. The Friends at Woodridge even worked with DCPL to facilitate the hiring of a paid student intern from Phelps, a Ward 5 school, to work side by side with the construction firm, something that should be mandatory on any library/school project. The rebuild renovation of the libraries has been vitally important, bringing new life to neighborhoods and spurring new development. For DCPL, new improved branches has brought more patronage. Even though Woodridge has been occupying interim space since November 2013, we have not lost a step in fulfilling the needs of the community. Year over year, we have increased our programming, circulation, and computer usage. While we have these wonderful new improved buildings, we still need to be vigilant that buildings remain vibrant both on the inside and outside. Landscaping must be upkept, physical plants maintained, and security state-of-the-art. Woodridge will have a green roof, which will need some attention. In keeping with innovative program, we hope that the roof will be able to use to bring in some additional revenues. Art galleries in big cities around the country are now allowing some of their space to be used for private events at a fee. Imagine a rooftop wedding. As mentioned in other testimonies, DCPL has been an excellent steward of its budget. Funds must be allocated for the timely completion of all branches, and especially the MLK renovation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. I appreciate your advocacy on behalf of Woodridge, but on behalf of all libraries as well. It's important. Just so you know, last year in the Budget Support Act, we put a provision in there that allows for just that use. If you would like to charge a small fee to have a wedding or something on the top of the Woodridge Library, you'll be able to do that moving forward, as long as the money goes back in, to the libraries. That's the deal. So that's a big step forward, in my opinion. I just want to thank you all for being here today. Again, adding your voice to the chorus, I think, today of what we've known as a good project and what's happening. We have a few more to go, like we've talked about, but I think we're on the right path, and there's always going to be kind of a need for a watchful eye on what's happening, and I think that's a really valuable role that you all play. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Councilmember Allen, see if he has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chairman Grosso. Again, thank you all very much for your testimony. Ms. Turner, I've gone to the Woodridge Library myself sometimes before construction, so I'm excited to see what it looks like afterwards. And I think you're telling the story about the type of construction. It's not like we're just throwing some cinder blocks together and putting up a block. I mean, having Bing Tom design it, to me, it speaks to the quality that the libraries, that DCPL brings to this, that really does respect that these are community hubs, and they are really special places. So I'm excited to be able to come over and visit you at the new Woodridge. Ms. Wyckoff, I appreciate your testimony. Wanted to let you know on the signage issue, Mr. Gross and I were just talking about this. Within the supplemental budget, there actually is money for the Rosedale, for new signage to go up at Rosedale. I think that we need to make sure that it's not just DPR signage, but it's also the library signage. But we'll work on that to make sure that we put the request in so that it reflects all the pieces that are in that space.
You know that the buildings are catty-cornered to each other, and there is lettering Rosedale Community Center over the rec center.
Yeah.
Nothing over the library, it's just paper letters. And there's nothing on the street side, which there is in both at Northwest 1, which is, and also a sign that's a freestanding sign on the corner that identifies a.
And that's at least how I believe the funding is intended to work, is that, as I go down 17th Street, you don't know there's a library there. You can see the pool.
You don't even know there's a rec there.
You can see there's a basketball court
Yeah,
there.
but-
That's about it. So I think that's the intent, is to have better signage there, especially on that prominent corner, to help draw more people into the resources that are there. So we'll continue to follow up on that.
I have pictures, I'll send them to you.
It's only a couple of blocks from my house, so I know exactly what it looks like. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Ms. Wallace, thank you very much. You and the entire Friends Up group really helped make the Southwest branch a really special place. It was great to see you out a couple of months ago for the kind of the family festival day, and those types of events that you create just help strengthen that community around Southwest. To the same thing I said to Commissioner Litsky, to the credit of you and so many neighbors that have continued to advocate for this, we have been able to move this from a replacement as a sale of the building to actually a rebuilding of that site. So that's going to be something we certainly will create some engagement around. I'll ask you the same question I asked Mr. Litsky, though, and you don't have to have an answer. It's part of what we'll wrestle with Saturday afternoon and others, but I guess, do you have any thoughts that you're willing to share or not around how we look at the future use of that site in terms of the context of the different Southwest needs?
I hadn't, actually. I think I wanted to see what the exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. I thought you were prompting me. I was like, she keeps an eye out on
you
me.
guys are a good team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We work together in Ward 6, you know that. But no, I hadn't honestly thought of in the back of my head every day. We do programming, we do things for the kids at Greenleaf, at James Creek, and even Syfax. I mean, even though it's a little further away, those kids are always in our minds. But as it relates to the building, the new building site, I hadn't thought of it because to be honest, I haven't had the time to go in depth into what the exact plans were. I have not seen the full plans and know what exactly specifically is in store for that
And that's
site.
why I was more asking, just to see, we have plenty of time to think about it. I think that certainly we'll have a much bigger conversation this Saturday afternoon. But it's just one of those things, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not recommending one way or the other, but just something for us to kind of keep in our thought as we kind of push and pull in our community conversation around how we address this. To me, it's incredibly important that we've got a site and a new library branch in Southwest that is reflective of the community, that is iconic, that fits all these needs that we've talked about through the Southwest Small Area Plan and others. So again, I appreciate all the work that you've been doing on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. One more panel of public witnesses, Joanne Newhouse from the Penn Quarter Neighborhood Association. And then is there anyone else that would like to testify? I have two more. Ms. Weiner, come on down. What did I say? What is it? Dana. Ms. Dana. And anybody else here would like to testify as a public witness or otherwise? Okay, you guys are going to have the final say before the government witnesses come up. So, Ms. Newhouse, do you want to kick us off here?
Good. I guess you can't move these forward. I'm short, so. So you can't hear me, okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm going to speak extemporaneously because I really didn't have time to prepare testimony. I just want to tell you that I think that the library has done an excellent job with the work to date on the Martin Luther King Library, and I hope that all the funding needed for the project will be forthcoming, even if it is more than what's budgeted at the moment. It's really going to be an extraordinary library. I think they've chosen just excellent architects, Meccano and Martinez and Johnson. They complement each other. And it's going to be probably one of the most inviting spaces in the city, and one that will be far more than what we think of as a library today. At least that's the proposal to date, and I hope it can be executed. And this is our neighborhood library as well as the city's library. It's well used, and it'll be even more, definitely more well used afterwards because people want to be there. And I think a lot of the programs that they're thinking of putting in there are just what the city really needs at this time. Our neighborhood association is behind it, and I don't think there's anyone in the community who isn't behind it. So we hope that it'll be funded and that the temporary space for the library during the interim will be funded as well. And that's it.
Great. Can you just identify yourself and say where
I'm
you're from
sorry.
again? I liked what you were saying, so I thought you could just say it at the end. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joanne Newhouse. I'm the Executive Director of the Penn Quarter Neighborhood Association. I'm speaking on behalf of the association, but also personally on my behalf. I've never been able to quite speak on their behalf without speaking on mine. It's one of my perhaps faults that I can't be neutral.
Thank you very much. And for those of you who don't know, Penn Quarter Neighborhood Association includes the Martin Luther King Jr. Library, which is our central library. So it's really important that you guys are supportive and behind it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we've had so far 2 of our breakfast. We have monthly breakfast meetings, which we started in 1993. We've been in existence since 1988, so we've had a long run. And we've had Richard speak and the staff speak at 2 of the breakfast
That's
meetings,
great.
and very well received.
Thank you. Ms. Steiner, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Robin Diener. I'm the president of the MLK Library Friends and also the president of the Citizens Association of the DuPont Circle neighborhood, where we do not have a library. My focus is on planning, but before I get into that, I do want to commend and agree with everything that's been said about the wonderful, I mean truly extraordinary progress of the library system in the District of Columbia. It's gone from being one of the worst in this country to absolutely a place where people want to come to work and to come to borrow books and everything else. The DC Public Library, though, has long operated without a plan except a budget, which is a sort of a plan, and rationales for the budgeting were not always clearly provided. So we were very happy to learn that one of the main initiatives of new director, not really new anymore, but new-ish, Reyes Gavilan, was going to be strategic planning. I am a fan of plans, and I do wish that the city actually would adopt an independent planning commission, which is one of the established best practices for municipal governance. But the library, as usual, is a little bit ahead and is embarking on a strategic plan. I would like to see a plan not limited to services and programming, which perhaps is just the beginning point at the moment. Those are the things that have been talked about at the initial sessions with the public. For instance, what possible new locations might be under consideration. I think a strategic plan, in order to be strategic, has to be encompassing. Regarding locations, a library was called for in the Office of Planning report from the community regarding McMillan, I think in 2002, and that is a good site for a library. These things take years to plan, so we need to get it underway if it's to be considered. And in view of the very successful co-locations at Deanwood and Rosedale and Northwest 1, are there other models that we might consider that we haven't heretofore, such as a children's library, which is something that my neighborhood might like to see in DuPont Circle in conjunction with the renovation of a rec center. The plans for the interim location of MLK, as far as I know, are a bit ill-formed at this time. I'm sure we'll hear more about them today. We understand that might be a very small interim library. That is worrisome. The library also has an extremely ambitious and I think excellent program for development, in development, for processing and distributing books to the DC Public Library, schools, DC Public Schools, and in the wonderful Books for Babies new program. And these are laudable efforts, which we salute. I just don't understand where the funding is going and why we would have such a small interim library. And if we need to develop a processing center, maybe it's a different budget item. We're also worried about Washingtoniana. This is a unique and vital research service. If that is going to be potentially closed for several years, that's a problem. For years and years and years, people like me and many others have said the obvious place for an interim library is the Carnegie. I don't know why we gave it to Events DC or what's going on there. That would be a terrific place for Washingtoniana, maybe for a children's library, and in conjunction with the Historical Society and Kiplinger Library. These are good connections. the library talks a lot about all of the outreach that they've done, and I do think they have done a lot. It's not exactly the outreach that I would have done. For instance, when you show people or talk about a new library and you have ideas for it, examples from other libraries are really critical in helping the average person sort of ascertain what they might like. And in terms of the large number, I think the number has been put at thousands of people who have been interacted with. I don't see really all of the back and forth that's been talked about, at least not judging from the idea scale, which is very complicated to use. And just one thing that I noticed on the idea scale that got a lot of votes was a meditation room. So that's an interesting thing to put at the library at MLK, but I don't see that in the new plans. It's a small thing, obviously, and could probably be added. I also think that focus groups should not be closed to the public. We're not developing top secret products here. It's a public library. I don't know why the focus groups need to be closed. The cost of new libraries has been estimated to be twice that of construction in other parts of the country. I do have a document on that that I will give you. And perhaps everyone has testified that libraries come in on budget and on time, and that's really hard to do. And maybe you have to overpay to do it. I don't know. But perhaps some analysis is needed there. Speaking yesterday about housing.
Wrap it up, Ms. Dina, can you wrap it up? Your time is.
Well, I'll give you my
that'd be
work.
great, but if you have a summary, that'd be fine.
I don't really have a summary. Let me see if I can just quickly cite the points that I wanted to make. We don't seem to be considering adaptive reuse of our more modern library buildings. We always tear them down. You get a lot of points for saving the structural steel and the foundation on LEED, so we might want to think about that. In terms of MLK, as many of you know, because you were on the staffs, even if you weren't yet council members, it's been a political football in this city. So to have it at last, having landed across the goal line, or whatever you say, I'm not a good sports person, is quite marvelous.
Touchdown.
It was, yes, touchdown. The decision not to privatize the library, not to sell it to private uses, was welcome, extremely welcome, and I do feel like I've done my job. But it was done in secret, privately behind closed doors, and that's not great for our city.
Thank you.
And then I guess I'll
give you one more
the
point.
rest.
All right, submit it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Allen, do you have any questions or comments for Ms. Newhouse or Ms. Diener?
I don't. That was a really helpful testimony, though, so thank you both very much. I appreciate it. And all of those are questions and issues we're going to be delving into in just a moment with the government witnesses. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Diener. Okay. We're going to now have Gregory McCarthy, the President, Board of Library Trustees, and Richard Reyes-Gavilan, the Executive Director of DC Public Libraries, come on down. You have a PowerPoint you want to do?
Yeah, for my testimony, we will have some images. If we
Great.
can get somebody, I'm not sure if the machine was turned off or not.
We'll get it up and running.
Okay.
I hear we can actually do that in this room, so I'm excited about that. And Matt's on it, so we're good. Why don't we let him
start?
No, let's wait for a second, see if we can get it. We're in good time here. I'm good. I agree. It was on the, wasn't it on the pillow? Oh, no, it's on this column, so maybe I'm thinking of that. You good, Matt? All right. Mr. McCarthy, are you going to be the first one to speak?
Yes, sir.
Brilliant.
Good morning, Chairman Grosso, Councilmember Allen. I'm Gregory McCarthy, President of the Board of Trustees of the DC Public Library. Our Executive Director, Richard Reyes-Gavilan, will deliver our main testimony. I don't have a written statement, but I'd like to make a couple of observations on behalf of the Board. As I think you probably noted earlier, the 10-year anniversary of the Brew Living Panel is coming up, and it's a great time to take some stop and think about the lessons we've learned since then and how we might do the next 10 years. Indeed, there are several important lessons that I think are worth noting this morning. The first one may seem very obvious today, but it wasn't obvious 10 years ago, which is our libraries have got to be flexible. The nature the nature of the services our citizens want and need is constantly evolving, and the manner in which they want us to deliver it to them is also changing. So our libraries have to be flexible in terms of space and architecture, and I think we've achieved that in the ones we've done over the last 10 years. We also know that the aesthetics matter a lot. In the libraries that we've remodeled or reconstructed, usage has often more than doubled from the previous version. So it says to me that you give our citizens something that's nice, you show them that respect, they're going to use it even more. And as people who are stewards of the taxpayer dollars, I think you all should take great notice of that. These buildings are worth investing in, and they're worth doing well, and they're worth doing first class. And I particularly say that with regard to Martin Luther King. We're spending a lot of public dollars on this library. We're very mindful of that. And there's always going to be the notion of value engineering to save here and there. But we're building a library for the generations. And 90 years from now, we don't want anybody to look back and say, why did they cut that corner? Why is it done that way? Why didn't they do that? So doing Martin Luther King first-rate, world-class is very, very important. But the next chapter, the next 10 years, what are the big questions that we've got to address, at least as a board? So we've asked our executive director to give us some thoughts and advice on two basic issues. One is, what opportunities are there for public-private partnerships in both the libraries that have not yet been renovated or reconstructed, but even the existing ones that we have. And not only do we save perhaps some taxpayer money, and not only might we add a community amenity housing, another educational institution or a cafe, but basically we create additional demand and we create additional activity and buzz, and it becomes a bigger hub for that community. So making certain that we take advantage of all that's offering there is very, very important. We've also asked the executive directors to give us some ideas about what might the future library look like. We've basically replaced all the libraries in almost the exact same footprint as we've had before, and we basically have had the same types of service. But is that the right model for the future? Ought we think about having more smaller libraries or fewer larger libraries, for example? And it's worth noting, for example, take Anacostia and Tenley. They're roughly the same in terms of gate count, the number of people that come through the branches every year. But in Tenley, the circulation levels are 5 times greater than they are in Anacostia. And in Anacostia, computer usage is twice as great as it is in Tenley. So what does that tell us about how we ought to organize and lay out those libraries? And it's especially valid for the libraries that we haven't yet built. So what is that new layout, and what is that new concept? As neighborhoods are coming online, new neighborhoods, they might want a library, and so I think we ought to have some good discussion about what is that new model. It might not be that a 20,000 square foot library is the right niche for every community. And so I think taking these lessons and customizing per neighborhood is the way we ought to go for the future. And I take notice, too, I want to commend our Friends groups. I didn't know much about the Friends groups before I became on the board here, and I've noticed they are our best friends, which is their name. They're also occasionally our best critics. And that's very, very helpful. They do keep us honest, and they do make certain that we're achieving the best we can, and we appreciate their partnership very, very much. So those are my remarks. I'd like to turn it over to our executive director.
Great, thank you. Rich Reyes-Gavilan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So during my testimony, there will be some images rolling through as examples. And we're joined by Joy Mex, our Director of Communication, who's such a wonderful staff member. Good morning, Councilmember Grosso and Councilmember Allen, and other members, associates of the Committee on Education. I'm honored to sit before you this morning to provide testimony on the modernization of D.C. public library facilities. In November 2005, 10 years ago next month, as has already been mentioned, Mayor Anthony Williams' Blue Ribbon Task Force on the future of the D.C. public library system released a seminal report that made recommendations for the modernization of the underfunded and long-neglected municipal library system. 10 years ago, the public libraries in D.C. were in disrepair, their collections and technology lacking, and their programs and services well behind those of leading library systems around the country. The momentum generated by the task force and the ongoing follow-through on its recommendations has provided a remarkable success story for Washington, D.C., and one of the most positive and recognizable aspects of the city's early 21st century transformation. Over the past decade, the District of Columbia has invested over $200 million in the modernization of its library campus, resulting in 15 new or fully renovated branches across the city. With an additional FY16 to FY21 city commitment of $263 million, construction is either underway or imminent in 4 additional libraries: Woodridge, West End, Cleveland Park, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library. In 10 years, thanks in part to the extensive community engagement that has been central to all of our projects, we have built some of the most striking and well-used public buildings in the United States. The first 4 branches that were entirely rebuilt were Tenley, Shaw, Anacostia, and Benning. In FY 2015, these were 4 of the 6 most visited neighborhood libraries in Washington, D.C. 858,000 visitors walked through their doors last year. Seniors reserved meeting rooms for their discussion groups. Job seekers learned how to make prospective employers take notice of their resumes. Toddlers enjoyed story time. Students met with their favorite Washington Nationals players while participating in our summer reading program. A lot of them borrowed books. They all left happy. I mentioned we've opened or fully renovated 15 libraries in the past several years. That is an impressive number for sure, but an incredible one when compared to what other cities around the country have been able to achieve. Few, if any, cities have invested in learning as aggressively as Washington, D.C. Brooklyn, New York, a borough serving 2.6 million people, has opened 1 new library in the past 20 years. It took an act of God, Hurricane Sandy, to help secure funding for full renovations of 2 storm-ravaged branches in 2012. With few exceptions, and this is almost a Twitter hashtag at this point, our capital projects have come in on time and on budget. We pride ourselves in being careful and responsible stewards of public dollars. I thank the mayor and council for having granted the library the independent procurement authority to help closely manage its own projects, and our own capital planning department for its keen oversight. Have we been perfect? Of course not. We've learned valuable lessons that will inform our approach to future building construction and effective library service delivery. 1 or 2 branches might be too small, 1 or 2 might be too big. Some neighborhoods may be overrepresented, while some growing neighborhoods have no library services at all. We know that libraries are not their buildings, that some of the most effective work that libraries do takes place in schools, in churches, and even in jails. In the coming months, I will be presenting a report to the library's Board of Trustees, proposing they consider endorsing an expansion of the library's footprint that does not necessarily involve further investment in 20,000 square foot facilities. Earlier this year, prior to the release of the FY16 to 21 Capital Improvement Plan, the library conducted a public-private partnership, or P3, feasibility study for its then unfunded and unrenovated branches, Chevy Chase, Lamont Riggs, Southwest, and Shepherd Park. We included the Capitol View Library in the feasibility study because we were uncertain the amount allocated in the CIP would suffice for a full renovation of the branch. The P3 study suggests that all of these branches could benefit from a mixed-use renovation approach. All are candidates for on-site affordable housing, some for market rate, and a couple for retail. Beyond helping to address other pressing needs in our city, the mixed-use approach helps the library by attracting more users. We want as many people as possible involved in the library. We think that exploring mixed use is a smart and cost-effective way to achieve that. However our new libraries are built, whether standalone or mixed use, we know that proper maintenance to these facilities is key to protecting the district's capital investment. Beyond needing sufficient funding for repairs and preventative maintenance, the library needs to do a better job understanding the unique challenges presented by each building in order that we keep them looking and functioning as well as they can. To that end, this past year we performed an HVAC audit on our 10 newest buildings to determine why several new buildings were at times uncomfortably warm or conversely too cold. We've begun the formal recommissioning of each system so as to keep them running smoothly and predictably. Similarly, in order to address issues with landscaping at some of our branches, in FY15 we conducted a landscaping assessment to get a sense of the scope of the work required to properly maintain our exterior spaces. We brought on some additional contractual help from a company with expertise in the regional flora, and we are now looking at several options for a long-term landscaping solution, especially at those branches that require the greatest attention. I'd like to turn now and say a few words about the modernization of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library. I've called it the most important capital project in the city, as it will be a colossal life-changing agent for thousands of district residents every single day. Digital literacy classes, seminars on starting a small business, kindergarten readiness classes, genealogical research, dance rehearsal, cooking demonstrations, film screenings, job fairs, silent reading, passport applications, and a host of other activities, all taking place under one glorious green roof at the same time. We are approaching a crucial stage in the project as the team looks to complete the design phase in the near future. Our architects have done tremendous work, and people around the world are taking notice. Just last month, the New York Public Library, after a lengthy and intensive worldwide search, announced that Meccano Architects, lead design architects for the MLK Library, had been selected to oversee the $300 million renovation of New York City's iconic central libraries. The next several months of the MLK project are pivotal. Very soon we will bring on a construction manager at risk who will oversee the design, development, and construction phases of the project, but before that will for the first time provide an accurate budget for the library we want to have built. In addition, we will be announcing our interim library service strategy that will likely include a fragmented citywide approach to services, relying on a small downtown hub, additional hours at all of our neighborhood branches, and help from city agencies and nonprofit partners to deliver our services for 3 years while we are under construction. Among the more exciting events happening in the very near future, I'm pleased to announce that on the evening of Wednesday, November 4th, the library will be hosting a panel discussion featuring Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, Dr. Howard Dodson, renowned leader in the movement to preserve African American history, and others on how to best honor the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. in the modernized Martin Luther King Jr. Library. It's a topic that is of great concern to so many of the district residents with whom we've spoken over the past 19 months, and we're very much looking forward to that event. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to testify. I'd like to close by expressing my deep gratitude to the Council for its ongoing support of our work, and to Mayor Bowser for the incredible investments that she's made. I'm joined by staff of the library this morning, and we are happy to answer questions and engage in conversation.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you both for being here and for the hard work that you do every day to make our libraries, I think, probably the greatest library system in the country at this point. And I can say that with great confidence since I've been to so many libraries around the country. I haven't really, but I can say with great confidence. I have some questions to start with around the central library question. The modernization, it's an investment, is significant. We've budgeted, as you know, over $200 million, or nearly, I guess, $200 million, not quite over. And I just wondering if you can expound a little bit more on the importance of having this robust central library in the district, because you're talking a lot about fragmenting and getting out in the community. In fact, I was every event I go to now, I see somebody from your office at the libraries there doing something, usually at a table, often engaging people, talking about the programs they're bringing to the rec center or to wherever space they are, and I love that concept. So talk a little bit about the value and really the importance of having this grand central library beyond just a neighborhood library for Ms. Newhouse. Great.
May I start, or do you want to start?
I'll say a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you correct me or add on as needed. There's a slide we have that shows the Convention Center, the Verizon Center, and Martin Luther King Library. And we like to call it kind of a triad. And so you have the Convention Center, which is very successful, great building, focuses by its very nature on out-of-town visitors. You have the Verizon Center, again, an excellent facility. We're glad to have it. Focuses mostly on people from Maryland and Virginia, and that's how they keep it in business. And those are both great tax generators for the city. But where's the one place in Washington, D.C. that belongs to D.C. residents from all 8 wards where we can go and be one city? all 8 wards. And that's lacking right now. Martin Luther King is not that magnet that it needs to be, not just for being a typical library, but for being a place where you can be entertained, where you can innovate, where you can go to a lecture, where you can go to GED training, where you can take your kids. And that's what this city lacks right now, is that one common hub that's a home for all of us. And that's what this new library can be. It's going to be much more than a library. It's going to be a place we can all call home when we're away from our homes here.
Do you want to add something?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a great context for speaking for DC specifically. But, you know, in general, the Central Library serves as the hub, really, around, you know, it's the nucleus around which the entire service strategy for the library revolves. Simply put, in our glorious branches of anywhere from 15 to 20,000 square feet, they are great at serving the needs of that very local community. But the types of flexibility and services that you can deliver in a space that's over 200,000 square feet, in terms of a very aggressive campaign around digital readiness or early childhood literacy or job skills development or large collections or large digital access, it really needs to be in a central place that is in a very accessible space. And I've mentioned in other testimony that the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library is really in the most accessible part of all DC. You can take it, any metro line can get you there without having to transfer. And so it's really reachable by, if you include Maryland and Virginia, millions of people, probably within 30 minutes.
Right. I appreciate that. Okay, so I think it's a great idea, but do we really have to do it? I mean, what's wrong with the building that we have there?
Can you show them the stairwell?
Well, I mean, look, in all honesty, I think forgetting momentarily the deferred capital maintenance involving a failing building. It's a over 40-year-old. It's over 40, like me, and we're all failing in some way, shape, or form. The building is completely and utterly. It has no sense of vertical circulation whatsoever, and you cannot minimize the fact that there is a very it's very difficult to get around that building. The stairwells are hard to find, they're dark, they're dangerous, or at least they give off the air of danger, and that is as bad as being dangerous as far as we're concerned. We know that there are thousands of district residents who don't want to use the downtown library. We hear it all the time. What can you do to make it more inviting? What can you do to make it more spacious? How can you, rather than retrofit new services into old spaces, redesign the building so you can have state-of-the-art spaces built to specification? Somebody, Sharon mentioned I was on the Kojo Nnamdi show yesterday, and there were a number of callers who were calling in about our Center for Accessibility, our services to the blind and physically handicapped. What we're doing right now in a retrofitted office building doesn't meet the demands of our patrons with disabilities. And that's just one example. We're expanding that space in the new building to encompass all the new technologies and serve the needs of that very unique population, and multiply that out by every resident in the district who's got some need that can be addressed by this new space.
So just to finish that up, why not tear down the building and build a new library there? You know, we have, Mies is really a Chicago-centered architect, isn't he? I mean, why keep it here?
Well, I mean, I think this is a matter of taste. If we're not talking about the Historic Preservation Review Board, and you know that the building was landmarked in 2007. It was landmarked mostly in part because it is a Mies building. It is his only building in D.C. and his only realized public library in the entire world. But I think it's also been landmarked because of its namesake. Mm-hmm. This is the first memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. In D.C., one of the very first memorials to Martin Luther King Jr. in the entire country. And I can't verify it. It might be the largest memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. in the entire country. And that is overwhelmingly important to so many people who live in this city. So I, for one, am ecstatic that the building is going to be modernized and kept. I think it is a tremendously important building, especially in a changing city, a city that is changing as relentlessly as D.C. is. I think we are going to strike a phenomenal balance of providing something new for every resident, but also being respectful of a building that was built and of its time, and something that reminds everyone of what it was like to be here in D.C. in the late 60s and early 70s.
I appreciate that, and I think the preservation of that history is extremely important here, and I think that people know that, but I just wanted you to just say it again and keep reminding folks of why we are doing it the way we're doing it, and I think that's important. You know, I'm over there quite a bit for meetings and for other events, and one of my favorite spaces right now is the Digital Commons area. I think it's new, it's interesting, it's airy, and it is packed with people all the time. What kind of programming are you going to put into the new level, new area, the new library there? How's it like kind of go with that concept of the airiness, the openness? Talk a little bit about how you pick the programs, what kind of programs you're going to put there. Maybe you don't have them identified just yet, but what are the styles that you're going to put in there?
Yeah, well, one of the issues with the existing Digital Commons, and it was a great investment when it was built in 2013, one of the issues that we've got with the space right now is that it serves as our major destination for computer users, but we've also tried to squeeze in semi-public or private meetings within the co-working spaces, and then we've tried to create another large public assembly space in that same area. Now, we hold our public board meetings at that space, and it's a challenging space in which to have meetings because sound does travel around and above the glass enclosures. So what we would like to do with the existing Digital Commons is really turn that into a space that is almost exclusively around access to technology, so that we've got people who are doing similar things, doing it together. We'll show you some more schematic design images at an appropriate time, but we're trying to connect we're proposing a visual connection to the space below the Digital Commons, which is going to be an expansion of what we're doing now. This is going to be our major innovation space, our creative space. We talk relentlessly about the DC's growing creative economy and how to better serve their needs, and we've had panel discussions on that, and we've had focus groups on it. So what we're trying to do is create spaces for folks who are learning to write, write creatively, and people who are painters and filmmakers and other creative types, to give them a space that is adjacent, at least spiritually, to the Digital Commons, and thereby address, I think, what is a huge workforce development opportunity for the city. And I should plug this coming Saturday and Sunday, we've got the DC Author Fair at the MLK Library, where we invite authors, both established and burgeoning, from all over the city to take part in workshops on getting published, on improving their craft, meet other writers. It is a phenomenal thing.
You do your advertising. I appreciate that. Before I turn it over to my colleague, I just wondered if, just to kind of not really get it out of the way, but really update the public on the timing on this, so we know on the record where we are in the planning stage, what's coming next. Maybe a little bit, if you don't mind, Councilman Brown, a little bit of update on the status of interim space. Where are we on all that? Kind of what's your next steps in this process with MLK?
Great. Our goal is to close the existing building in about a year or a little bit over a year. It's not going to be sort of turn the lights off and everyone's gone. It's going to be staggered. We can move staff. We can move some books. Obviously we will try to keep the building open to the public as long as humanly possible. But just to make it as simple as possible to digest, we anticipate being closed for the better part of 3 calendar years, 2017, 2018, and 2019. We would love to open at the end of 2019. Maybe it'll be early part of 2020. Really impossible to say, but that is our goal. In terms of the interim library service delivery, I mentioned in my testimony, the board has endorsed a fragmented approach, and I think some of Board President McCarthy's thinking around delivering services in new and innovative ways really feeds into our interim library services strategy. There is no way that we can approximate an interim service that will house 400,000 square feet of what we're doing now at MLK. Certainly we can do it at a branch level, but we can't do it at MLK. So what we think is probably the best thing to do is have a small downtown hub, and we are currently in discussion with a landlord to sign a lease on a space downtown. But we really do want to rely on our neighborhood branches and our partners in local government Ms. Diener commented earlier on the Carnegie Building and the Historical Society of Washington, D.C. We have a verbal commitment with the executive director there, John Swow, to help us deliver some of our valuable local history Washingtoniana services in that building during the period of construction. And then up and down the line, we've had conversations with the First Congregational Church next door to the library. We will likely host our large public programs there once a month on Tuesday nights for 3 years. And then, we've got so many great partners in local government. Keith Anderson, the Director of Parks and Rec, is really looking forward to helping us deliver targeted services using recreation facilities. I do apologize, it's not fully baked right now. It's something that is really evolving, and we will be more likely taking advantage of opportunities rather than dictating exactly what our needs have to be. So that's a very, very flexible approach, and we do beg your forgiveness in not having that all well thought out, or the public's forgiveness. It's a complicated move.
Great. Thank you very much.
I think, Mr. Chairman, it's worth adding, too, we were a little bit surprised how difficult it was to actually identify possible space downtown for the core services. We need about 3,000 square feet at the street level. Is that the right number?
Oh, no. I mean, it varies.
Yeah, it turned out to be more difficult than we thought, and finding that amount of space that was centrally located, had window access, and was on the street level was very, very difficult. So our options turned out to be relatively few.
Right. Yeah. Ideally, at first, without having done any thinking or gone out and seen what's available, we were hoping to get anywhere from 25 to 50,000 square feet of space, but to Mr. McCarthy's point, it was untenable. And then really, I think we had this sort of epiphanical moment where, why are we trying to do that? I mean, it's a short period of construction. We also don't want to, we've got $198 million for this project, and that covers interim as well. And the last thing we really want to do is just bleed the budget for interim services.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you very much. Thank you both for the work that you're doing with our libraries. I have a couple of questions, MLK related, but want to ask you a couple of the branch questions since we had so much of the public testimony focused on two at least, just happened to be in Ward 6. Wanted to ask you related to the Southwest branch, and Mr. Reyes-Gavilan, I think you might have been on the job a week or two, and you got thrust right into a pretty big meeting right there at the Southwest Branch Library, and I appreciated the way that you also approached it. But I think that we've certainly seen now the opportunity that we see in front of us. And we also have the funding, which is begins in FY17, so next fiscal year, as well as 18 and 19 for the actual construction. We talked just a little bit with the public witnesses around how do we start that planning process. Since the beginning phases of this are relatively soon on the horizon, I don't know if we want to have a completely separate independent planning process from engaging with the DC Public Library. And you also heard, and you may have seen this already, some really great thinking that went in through the Southwest Small Area Plan process that really generated a lot of good ideas and feedback regarding the uses. What do you see as some of the next steps for the Southwest community as we move towards the planning and the construction about how we engage? And I guess just as important, when does that engagement process start in a way that the neighborhood and community can feel is in a constructive way?
Great. So, I believe we've got several $100,000 of planning money in FY17. And what we typically do when we start the planning process is work very, very closely with the local Friends group. So as an example, right now we are in design phase at Cleveland Park, and Joe Bogard, who was here a little while ago but doesn't seem to be any longer, we've had maybe 4 or 5 community meetings. Some of them are very exploratory to talk about some of those things, like what are the services that mean the most here. We'll typically bring on an architect first, I should say, so that we're not communicating secondhand. I think the library stands with its architect. We hear what the public wants. We have charrettes. We go back. We do some concept design. We come back. It's a phenomenal process that predates my arrival here in D.C. The amount of energy and time dedicated to community engagement is really, I think, laudatory and remarkable. So I think once that budget money is in hand, that's what we typically do, is get the architect on board, and then we go out with the Friends Group, and we schedule community meetings through the Friends Group.
So you see that as, well, just the community engagement part is important. I think it's also something that the library does very well. It's why we have such great products at the end of the day. But so
except that meeting that I was at last year, it wasn't as cheerful as some of my other meetings.
You know what? Sometimes that was still a constructive meeting. It was still a constructive conversation.
Yeah, we know that people don't want that library to move from its footprint, and we've taken that to heart. But we should still continue to have those conversations around possibly building up, I think, on site. I think it's, as stewards of public funds, I think we would be remiss in not having conversations about possibilities there, understanding that that moving the library is a non-starter.
Right. Difficult conversations can still be good conversations. And
Absolutely.
So I think that was a very constructive evening. What I guess the question would be then, so if the budget is, so FY17, the capital dollars are about $2.2 million to start that process. So from your perspective, obviously you can't spend dollars you don't have yet, so not until FY17, which is October 1st of next year,
right,
would you be able to even start the process of getting an architect on board and all that?
Absolutely. That's when we would start that.
But I think to the questions that are out there about one, what can the community want and help shape vision, as well as a conversation around, is it a fully standalone, nothing else included library, or are there opportunities for co-location that make sense that would serve the southwest neighborhood in the city? I think those are conversations we can have over the next year, and certainly you'd want to have some of those decisions made before you ever get to the architect, because we need to understand the scope of what we're doing. So I think working with our Southwest leadership, with you, I think we can try to, over the next year, have that conversation in a way that puts you in the best position once you actually have the dollars available.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is no need to wait at all for those sorts of conversations. We can schedule those, next week if we want to start having some preliminary conversations about what's possible, for sure.
Great. All right, let me switch over now to the Southeast Branch Library. One of the things we talked about was our reality of a physically constrained space in a very high usage. You actually had a slide up earlier where you showed a couple of the highest visited libraries, and I think in each case they matched up either with really high access to transit or really high density around it as two kind of key factors as to making something even more accessible. And I think in the case of the Southeast Branch Library, you're going to find both those things, where you have a high density of residents and usage, as well as you probably can't get a more convenient transit spot than that. So we know it's a highly utilized space, but we also know it's a very physically constrained space. We've heard what I think is a really great idea and proposal around how to think creatively in ways that we haven't done before around how to use that space. And wanted to see kind of a two-part question. One is, what, from your perspective, are some of the next steps to be taking to engage in that conversation? Because, again, while this is a couple of years out in the capital dollars, the capital budget for this was done in a way that anticipated more than just renovating the existing building. Because, as you'll note, there's more capital dollars than it would take to just renovate it, and that was on purpose. The second part would be, though, have you seen other examples of ways in which, from a library services, that we address a physically constrained space, but that has a huge demand and need and usage? And maybe, because this is not the normal concept for a library, but I think it's an incredibly creative and novel way to get at some of the challenges. But there may be other examples that you've seen as well that we should be looking at to fold into this.
I can only think of one other library anywhere in the country that is entirely below grade, and it's in New York, adjacent to a busy subway station in Midtown, and it is a small postage-sized library, no natural light, and it serves really as a transactional library. It is just mostly bestsellers, in and out, super high usage, and serves its purpose. In terms of Southeast, I absolutely agree that it is small for its usage. I actually brought a few numbers with me. It is our 8th most trafficked library in the city. We had 157,000 visitors last year alone, and it gets more use than maybe 8 or 9 libraries that are twice as big, if not more. So that's it's great. I think that's pretty good evidence, and by virtue again of it being in a major transportation artery and a densely populated neighborhood, those are 2 key components for us going forward when we will look to build. The trick for us, frankly, about planning and about devising, what would go where, for example, if we have an innovative library with a subterranean space. Certainly, we could start drawing that with a piece of paper. What are some of those activities that don't necessarily require a tremendous amount of natural light? The truth is that something this innovative requires a lot of planning and requires a lot of planning dollars. I'll give you an example. When we do our normal due diligence studies for neighborhood libraries, we will spend upwards of maybe $25,000, about $25,000 for a due diligence study. When you consider something along the lines of Southeast, which involves working with DDOT and WMATA and DPW and involves, some serious structural engineering work, you've got to figure that we would be spending upwards of $100,000 on just figuring out what the budget is. So there is a healthy amount of money in the FY 19 and 20 budgets for Southeast. But we have, and certainly that's more money than we would need if we were just renovating the existing site. But we have no idea how much money we would need if we were to embrace the subterranean concept. We'd love to explore it. I think it's I love interesting projects. I love doing something that maybe people can look at and say, wow, we built an underground reading room and it has all the light and dignity and provides all the great services that we've got in our other light-filled spaces. But it's going to be a challenge.
Well, I think, without question, this is a big idea. This is a complicated project, but frankly, there's no other agency that I would look to that I think I would have confidence that says this is the type of big thinking that our libraries does. You're right. There's got to be. I would hate for us, and I think it would be a mistake to wait until FY19 to then beginning to say, okay, well, now how are we going to make this actually happen? Because we'll have wasted the opportunity. I think that we've got a couple $100,000 that's actually in the budget already for the environmental assessments taking place with the Department of General Services. If DGS has not partnered with you in the way in which I think they need to, so that you're fully aware of and engaged in their process, that's going to be a little frustrating for me to hear, but also a clear action step for me to take, which is to make a stronger link there, because we've got they're spending a couple $100,000 on work that is going to be necessary to evaluate that space, as well as the alphabet soup of agencies and jurisdiction that goes with this. But to the extent that can be enrolled into the planning and that you're going to need to be doing, I'd like to make sure that's happening now, because I think that's informed down the road.
We haven't met with DGS about this, but we're happy to, and we have a great relationship with them. So I think that part of this for us has been just some of the confusion around the budget, and because it's a really innovative project, we haven't really gone out of our way to begin thinking about it, but we are happy to, and we would love to sit in on some meetings and think about where the synapses are and what that could look like. And frankly, I think that it's again our responsibility to come back to the library board and to you, council member, and say, hey, there's some real problems here, and why we think this may not work, or why we think this is a phenomenal idea, and let's move forward.
I'd expect nothing else from you. Absolutely. Great. Thank you.
And we'll do another round too. So, Charles Allen was just speaking about making that you guys are the agency that he wants to do this, and that he has trust in you, and I do too. And I think part of the purpose of this hearing was to figure out why that is, right? I mean, everyone talks about on time, on budget. Everyone says what a great job you did. But I'm trying to also make this hearing a little bit of a lesson for other agencies if they're willing to take a look at it. Not that, well, we're the greatest type thing, but just that what are some of the things that you do? What are some of the things that you have in place that make it so it's possible for you to do this? And I'm not talking structural like, well, we have independent procurement authority. I don't mean that. I mean, the daily steps you take, the community engagement, the planning ahead like you were just talking about, the, getting a strong architect in place at the right time, and then monitoring the budgets, right? How do you make sure that these budgets are audited and on time and on budget is a slogan for something that takes a long time to accomplish. And so I wonder if you can just take a couple minutes of my time to walk us through what it is that makes you so successful when it comes to these branches that you've done and construction projects you've done. I have responsibility for a lot in this committee, including a lot of school buildings getting built all over the city. And I think it would be good for us to just hear why it is that the libraries have been so successful. The schools have also been very successful. I'm not trying to say they haven't been, but they've been anything but on budget. And so it would be good to know exactly what your thoughts are on that in any way that you can share.
I don't think that there's really any great mystery about some of this. I mean, I think, frankly, a public library is the most public of agencies. We've heard a little bit before about the accountability that we have not only to our local council members but to our community members. I think we've absolutely learned that we have to be incredibly vigilant about all of our projects, keeping people informed every single step of the way. We've got, we really do have an extraordinary staff, I have to say, and they're here. I look at people like Archie Williams, who is constantly on the phone with friends groups. We're constantly scheduling friends meetings, and whenever we see a problem, there's a course correction. We have our Gantt charts, and we really want to hit all of our milestones. And I think, part of the fact that at this point, we are only 26 facilities, so we can really invest all the time that we need on looking at every one of our projects. So, our Director of Capital Planning, who's sitting behind me, David Salter, and our Head of Facilities, Kim Fuller, who's sitting, where's Kim Fuller? She's back here. We've got people who are just focused on each one of these projects, and again, they're accountable to me, and I'm accountable to the board, and we're all accountable to the city. And look, we've developed a phenomenal reputation. I wouldn't have moved down to D.C., frankly, if we didn't have that reputation at this point. And I will no way let that slip. So for me, it's really just about being accountable, doing what's right. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Sums it up well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I want to just shift a little bit to, you guys both have mentioned P3 projects as a potential here. I think I know what they are, but I'm not sure I know exactly what they are in the context of how this might play out. Can you explain it a little bit more? Talk about what you mean by that. Where's the role that it would play in your eyes? Are we at the infant stages with this concept, or is this something that we can look forward to and something that we all need to get more educated on so that we actually can, be knowledgeable and supportive when necessary?
We are at the infant stages. I mean, we've seen projects like this become very controversial and become sort of simply out of hand, where the library may no longer even be a part of the conversation. What we want to do as part of a very measured planning process, and again, I'll echo Ms. Diener's comment earlier, where we're doing a strategic plan right now. Our strategic plan is service-oriented. Something that my board has challenged me to do is provide them almost an addendum to that strategic plan that really is about our facilities. And what can we do to not only deliver effective library service all over the city, but really to be great stewards of public funding. If we've got $15 million and we think that we can do something even better for 8, then we have to at least have that conversation, even if it takes me getting screamed at in a community meeting. So we have not broached this with any of you, number one. Again, I think it makes sense to look at our unrenovated sites right now and look at what the opportunities are for things like affordable housing, and other city needs, and then determine what the appropriate steps are in order to move forward. And in some cases, I know that we won't move forward, but at least we have to broach the conversation. And we've got time. So our unfunded branches are unfunded, and we've got some branches that are funded but really only far away. So we do have some time to take a measured approach, but also take an approach that this is something that, from my vantage point, benefits the library. And I think that in the past, so for example, you mentioned the move of the Southwest Library. I think that was really something that there was a feeling that the library was sort of an add-on to this, that this was not about delivering library services. From my vantage point, it is about library services, and I would recommend it only through that lens.
I'd just like to add, I think the word P3 or the concept of P3s are alarming to a lot of people. But for us, from the board's perspective, it's our job to do that extra due diligence and at least explore it as the case may be. And it indicates no prejudice at the outset of actually doing one. But by the time we come back to you and ask for funding, you're going to ask us, have you looked at all the alternatives to make certain that as few taxpayer dollars as possible are expended here? And we want to be able to say, yes, we did. And we're not economic development people. We're not developers. It's not our job to do that. But if we can add a community amenity that makes the library stronger, I think that's our role to explore that and share it with you.
And so that's the idea, is that you're in the process of exploring that. Maybe down the road you'll come back to the government or to the council or to whomever and say, this seems like a better idea, or it doesn't seem like a better idea, depending on what you've come up with.
Right.
And essentially, it'd be leveraging assets that we have to get the private sector engaged in the process so that we can save money and at the same time deliver greater services.
And it could also mean just adding, for example, a cafe or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to mean a co-location of that magnitude.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I'm going to close out my little round here by just noting something that somebody said to me. I was over at the library. I don't know if it was Archie that said it to me or somebody. It may have been you, Rich, that said, libraries are just the extension of the school day in a lot of people's minds. And I think there's real value in that comment. And I want to say, as the chair of this committee, that is partly the way I look at it. It's not just, it's not only, services to the community. It's a really big deal for the children in our city who are, in school until 3:30 or so. And then where do most of them come? Many of them then come to the library and continue their school, continue their education in that library. And I think it's something that we can't lose track of and something we have to keep in mind. And I think you're doing a good job of that and providing the after-school programming and the summer programming. And, not only do you pick them up from 3:30 to 9 or so at night sometimes, but you pick them up during the summer as well. And wonderful programs that are happening in the summer for our students so that they don't have a gap in their learning from when they get out in June to when they start again in August. And, I think as a city, people know that. It's intuitive and you know that, but I don't think people really know it unless they get into the libraries and see, like I've been able to do, the real engagement that we have of our schools and our students into the libraries in this off time. So I'm going to keep pushing for us to be investing in libraries, to be investing in the system, to be investing in the programs that you've put out there, as well as the Martin Luther King Library downtown as a model for how we can do it right in our city. And somebody mentioned, I think it might have been Ms. Diener, about the partnership with the schools and books and the opportunity for books to be in more and more classrooms through a partnership with the libraries. That's innovative. That's thoughtful. That's using our resources smartly. I think it's something we have to continue to do.
Great. And, I should recognize Deputy Mayor Niles, who,
yes,
in her short term, she's been really fostering a collaborative approach. She's got all of the education cluster leaders meeting on a monthly, if not more often, and that includes the chancellor and the head of the public charter school board and the head of Parks and Rec and the new president of UDC. We're going on a retreat next Friday. She is really looking to connect our services in that way that I think, Chairman, you're describing. And it's really exciting to be part of that type of collaborative spirit. And we mentioned that operations center that we're contemplating around the shared book buying. That wouldn't occur if you didn't have folks who really were thinking about the the ultimate users of our services. You know, we could possibly be talking about, you know, moving significant chunks of budget from one agency to another agency. And in the past, you've got that sort of territoriality, you've got that sort of siloed thinking that says, hey, you know, that's my budget. Maybe we'll do a budget mod or something like that. But now we're talking about, well, maybe we can talk to the council about just moving this money into your budget, and everyone is just hands-off, collaborative, and thinking about what's best for students. So it's really great. It really is.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate a lot of the questions that you've asked around MLK that I don't need to repeat now. A couple of quick notes, though. You talked about the flexibility of our spaces, which I appreciated. When we looked, there's another one of the slides you put up. I think it was Southwest, it was Lamont Riggs, Chevy Chase. It was kind of this bunker style of architecture. I think we loved it maybe in the 60s and 70s. And the style that you have now, both from an architecture standpoint, which are very iconic, open, bright, sun-filled spaces, as well as flexible spaces, because that's a big part of, I think, what makes our libraries what they have become. I've been going to the MLK Library for years. I don't think I've ever checked a book out at MLK Library. I go there for meetings, for lectures, to take my daughter to the children's library, to go and experience the space. But I don't think I've ever actually checked a book out of that library. But there's so many more uses there. And I'm seeing that more and more in our neighborhood branches as well. And I think Chairman's point, too, around what our after-school means. I am thinking really, like, for example, the Southwest branch, where in the children's section, which is the second floor, it is an extension of the school day. And the staff does an absolutely phenomenal job. Everything from helping mentor to help do homework to providing a safe space for these kids. And the reality is that there are going to be a lot of students that are going to be in that space for hours without seeing their parents or a caregiver, and they're going to be headed home at 9 o'clock at night or so. But the experience they have with the adults and the folks in the community that are caring about them and trying to help make sure that they've got what they need to be successful, it happens in our library. And so at least Southwest is just one example, and I know we have many, where it's just done really, really well. And I think it's because you've helped embrace that idea of the flexible space as well, of how we make that work. To continue the flexible space conversation, one question I had around MLK, we've touched on a lot of it, so this is really, I think, my only question here. To what extent are we looking at the downtown, our flagship, from the space, since it's so accessible on Metro? We talked about, you know, you can hop on a Metro line and you can get there. It's really well served by that. And what we have found, at least in private construction, so whether you want to talk about residential buildings, commercial buildings, even construction from 5 years ago to where we are today, the amount of parking we build is not quite in line with the way people are using it. So we've got parking lots that are sitting empty that haven't been used the way in which we maybe even thought 5 years ago because of such a growth in transit as well. How does that inform your thinking as you're looking at the MLK Library in terms of the uses, your flexibility of the space, in terms of being able to think through making sure that we've got the best thinking possible out? What do we need from a parking perspective, but also to not waste space building a parking lot when we could also be providing services and amenities for our library?
That's a great question for a couple of reasons. The most important of which, I think that this is probably where we've done the least amount of thinking in terms of, I think, we're not necessarily at a stage in the project where we can't make pretty radical deviations from where we are right now. So all of our design has focused right now, for the most part, on the publicly accessible spaces, which is the A level, 1 level below grade, and up through the new rooftop addition on the 5th floor. You know, we've begun having some spirited discussions about parking and what does it mean to be in a major metropolitan area where people are emphasizing mass transit. So you know, I'm not much of a driver myself, so it's a really good conversation that we will continue to have, but we haven't really settled on one approach or another. You have any thoughts?
Well, I think it's worth noting, to the extent there's any conflict or we have more demands in terms of programming than we have space, I think it's safe to say parking will be the first to go. We probably don't need all the spaces that we have there now. The most compelling use for the parking wouldn't be for staff, certainly not for patrons, but in the event that we rent the space out for special events or something, some of those people would find parking valuable. But Rich reminds us the New York Public Library, which has balls and graduations and weddings there, has 0 spaces associated with it. When you go to the Mellon Auditorium on Constitution Avenue, there's no parking associated with it. So it's the least important thing that we've got right now in terms of space. So,
Okay, well,
Yeah, and I should say, because we have been talking about space, we should keep in mind that just in the public realm, we're moving from a library that has about 151,000 square feet of publicly usable space to a library that's got about 240,000 square feet of publicly usable space. So we've got a delta of an additional 90, and that's without even thinking about the parking lot. And that involves basically just shrinking my office, and we get about an additional 90,000 square feet of publicly usable space. If you've ever been there, you guys will appreciate the joke.
You know you're going to fill that up, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not just going to sit there,
Right.
empty. Okay.
So well, I appreciate the fact that you're looking at it. I mean, I think that you're going to have some parking that goes in this, but I would challenge you to really think through. I mean, you have precious dollars to be able to spend on this project. Parking is one of the most expensive things that we sink into the ground and pay for, and it will eat into your ability to build out the other public spaces. And so I know once we get too far down the road, you almost can't go back and look at things once we've gone pretty far down. So I think now is the time to help chew through that, challenge it. I would argue, based on how much transit we have, I know we're going to have people who always want to make sure that we are driving to our library. But I think we've got very successful examples of libraries in D.C. that don't even have any parking, and they work. So finding the right balance is something I hope you do, because I think those dollars, once we build the parking lot, you can't undo it. And
Right.
so making as smart a decision as we can, finding that balance is going to be important. I'm glad you're wrestling with that right now. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank you guys especially for sharing your best practices about the libraries today. I actually greatly appreciate all of your perspectives and insights, and I'm excited about the modernization of the Martin Luther King Library downtown. It's, I think, one of the final pieces, as you mentioned, Mr. McCarthy, it's one of the final pieces of a revitalized downtown to make sure that it can serve as a civic hub and really an education and entertainment mecca here in the District of Columbia. So I'd like to thank all the public witnesses and, of course, all the friends groups that are so active and engaged for being here today. We'll have another hearing on these issues, I'm sure, but probably not this year. So everyone can just go back to work, and we can revisit this in the performance oversight hearings. I'm going to let you know, though, the record does remain open until November 5th if people would like to submit written testimony to this hearing. And the time is now 12:15 p.m. on the same day that we started, and this roundtable is adjourned.